At 6:30, is that jive with everybody else?
Yep.
Yes.
All right,
I've got
And,
6:30.
all
So
right.
for the roll, I've got Bob Lyons, Burke, not Cody, Knorr, Schuffner, Stump, and West.
All right, so I'll call this meeting to order then. We have a quorum, and our first item of business is the minutes of January 25th.
I would move approval. This is Susan.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
This is Carrie Schuffner. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes of January 25th are approved. Next item is Middleton Center Phase 3. I think we've seen this before, a timer 3. Sean, you want to kind of bring us up to date on where we are now with this issue?
Sure. The short version is the last time we talked about this as a committee, I had introduced two options for the piles that are within our sewer and water easement areas between the two buildings.
Mhm.
And those two options I had introduced in concept were either remove them or cut them off at an elevation below the invert of the sanitary sewer main that's nearest to those piles. So below the excavation at which we would dig in the future. And the contractor of Stevens Construction at the time advised the committee that they couldn't feasibly dig to the elevation below our sanitary sewer main safely to cut the piles off there. So they'd have to take them out. Scott Zimmerman, who's on the call tonight, has more recently said, well, they've asked him to deal with the pile issue. And he does believe that they can feasibly dig to an elevation below the invert of the sanitary sewer main and cut them off. So he wanted to ask if the committee would include that in the permission options effectively. We had discounted that last time because we were told it couldn't happen. And so now we're coming back to ask if the committee would allow that.
These are the pilings that are not along Parmenter Street, correct?
Correct. These are along Terrace Avenue between the two buildings. So let me go to a drawing of that area. So this is where the old fake water tank thing was along the railroad tracks, and then along Terrace Avenue, sort of centered between the two buildings. I'll zoom in. You'll all get vertigo. So we've got our sanitary line running here and a water line running here. And then in sort of pink or magenta, depending on your screen, is this underground electric that's labeled UE.
Mhm.
Green is the property line. And then these I-shaped symbols are where the physical piles are located or thereabouts. And Scott, if you want to unmute yourself and join in discussion, feel free. But in practice, we're really talking about, I believe, just these three piles, if that makes sense.
All right, and the ones to the east of there, those have been removed or will be removed?
These will be cut off,
Cut off?
At least 3 feet below the sidewalk, effectively. That was a previous decision of the committee. Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there's no change with respect to what happens to the ones near the gas line on Parmenter Street?
Right, that was what the, let me just zoom out for a second and pan over there. So that was what the committee had talked about last time in this area too, these, I don't know, 6 or 7 piles to be cut off below the elevation of the gas main and at least 3 feet below the sidewalk, whichever is deeper.
All right. And then the third area where there was some question about things.
Yeah.
There weren't any pilings there.
Scott checked in on that and said, well, these were intended to have been put in, but there was a conflict with the concrete slab underneath the water tank, is my understanding. And then by the time that was all removed, the excavation contractor decided they really could just slope this land back instead of retaining it. So they never put these three in, he said.
Okay.
Did I get that right, Scott?
You did.
All right. So then tonight's discussion kind of focuses on these three. And while previously the committee at the request of the contractor said, let's go ahead and require that they be removed. The request tonight is to consider partial removal of them just down to the elevation of whatever this invert of the sanitary main about here is.
And the water main
Well, the water main will be more shallow than the sewer,
for sanitary.
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure. So we'd want to go that deep so we can't possibly dig into these things in the future.
Okay.
And what's
And
the
Sean,
downside
can-
of that? Sean, is there any long-term liability to the city to having those things remain there?
I don't think at that depth we're likely ever to dig into them. So I don't see any. You know, I could foresee that, say over here, right? If a fiber optic company came along with a drill rig and banged into it, it could stop their drill. But we're, as the city, unlikely ever to dig there. I suppose the electric company might encounter something like that, which is why we wanted it below their stuff, so that they also then don't dig into it.
All right.
Sean, I'm just curious why. So why, you know, if we had asked like to have these pilings removed, is it the same reason as last time of why they don't want to remove them? I think it was like some unstable soil issues or something.
Yeah, I think, and I'll just give you the short version of what I think Scott said, although he's here, is that these soils tend to want to stick to the piles. So as they're vibrating them and pulling on them, they open up a void in the earth around them. That's difficult later then to compact. So it can cause long-term settlement in proximity to each of these piles as they're shaking them and pulling on them. It just disturbs the native soil.
And what is the upshot of the indemnification issue?
Our city attorney advised that we really, that indemnification isn't the right tool for something like this. It's one of those pieces of paper that either is backed by a security or it's not, and getting surety forever, it's a difficult thing. So he said effectively what we should do then is grant an easement to the benefit of the abutting property owner, whose piles these are, effectively granting permission for them to remain in place within that easement area, which would be a couple 3 feet wide along the right of way, if that makes sense. And then they would just be permitted to be there.
But any future problem that might occur with those would then not involve that property owner.
Well, it's still their
the
stuff.
land right here.
It's just that it's permitted to be there. And granted, it's not a utility. So when MG&E's out here, they're a public utility. They have rights to be out in the right of way. A pile typically doesn't have those kinds of rights, but at least that gives us an opportunity to say, oh, when you're talking about putting in a fiber optic and planning your route, this will show up as a mapped easement, and we'll have tied to it this drawing of surveyed locations of the piles, so that any future underground contractor has this information available, which is at least a good way then for us to track it. Otherwise, it would just be memory based, and that's as bad as it gets.
So this is Robert. I would make a motion that we
allow the cutting off or the partial removal of these pilings, and that we track where they're located in an easement document.
Okay, and as I don't know that I've got it super handy, but let me try to bounce up to the staff recommendation, make sure we're not missing something here. Whoa. Which was just kind of these two bullet items. So it's, like you said, allow partial removal down to the elevation below the sewer main, and to defer that effective upon getting that easement recorded.
And that is better than my motion, so that's my motion now.
Okay.
All right, we have a
If you're
motion.
in
Is there a
favor of
second
that.
to Robert's motion?
This is Carl, I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Where's the money in this whole deal? That's my concern, is that we originally agreed to have all of them removed.
Removed.
Someone is saving a ton of money by not having to remove these. And where is that going? I mean, can we get it in escrow? So if we ever run into problems, the city runs into problems, and we're covered.
Could be put into the surety bond.
Yeah, I'm just, there's a lot of dollars and cents here that are falling by the wayside that someone is benefiting, and the city is not benefiting at all.
That's a fair question. Is that something you can address, Scott, or is somebody from T-Wall here? Is T-Bon on the call by chance?
Yeah, I don't believe they are, but I can try to address it.
Okay.
In terms of money, to pull these piling, we often, as a contractor, ask for the right to pull these to try to recoup the steel. And this was similar on this project. So we don't put any money into our proposal to the developer to do that. We reclaim the steel and use that as the dollars that we spend to pull them. And it's pretty costly to pull these. The problem we found on this site in Middleton, we did phase 1 of this project also, and phase 2, is that, as Sean said, these soils are a little bit different than most soils in that it's a clay type material, silty clay material that sticks to the piling. And we found when we pulled it, you create a void and it collapses, but then it settles over time. And so when we discussed this with the utility right next to these piles, they were pretty adamant about us not pulling those in danger of settling that utility. So to answer your question, I'm not sure if anyone's benefiting because there was never really any dollars involved in not pulling them or pulling them. It would have been a steel salvage issue or cost consideration. And as I said, in this case, we abandoned that idea just based on the risk of settling adjacent utilities. And that's the reason we're asking for the recommendation to cut them off. Is it's just not worth the chance of settling the sewer and having an issue there. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question about cost.
Well, it does partially, I guess, but there is a cost to pulling those things, and it's a cost that you will not have to assume, which probably somewhere along the line was built into your proposal when you said you were going to pull them all.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm trying to explain is it's not in our proposal. And the reason it's not is because you can't always get all the piles out. So when we go to do it, we do it on our own accord. So we'll spend the money to pull them, but we regain the salvage value of the steel. And so, as I said, the developer had never seen those dollars on the proposal, and we never put those dollars in the proposal. It's, I'm not how to better to explain it other than there was never money there to pull them. That would have been on our discretion if we thought we could get them out, and then it would offset by the salvage value.
And the problem I have is it's not at your discretion. It was agreed to that they would all be
Come
taken out.
Just for, this is a while ago, but that's based on your email, Scott, that said that they'd be temporary and removed.
I'd have to go back to that. I can't remember how
That
that
was-
worked on this site.
During plan review, Rich Wyhert of our staff had mentioned, well, we can't just leave those in there, especially in the easement area, which was the proposal at the time. And your email was, well, they're just temporary and they'll be removed.
Well, I apologize. I don't recall that email, but it still comes down to the fact that, pulling them is a pretty risky situation and on the site, a very risky to the utilities that are there.
And claiming total, you just mentioned that you did both phase 1 and phase 2, and these soil conditions existed there as well. So you were well aware of that when it was agreed to that you'd pull them.
Yeah, but what we weren't, and you're right, we did pull some on phase and on phase 1 and 2 when they weren't next to a utility. And when we bid this project, the utility, our understanding, the utility in the easement was a concrete box conduit for the electric company. And when we explored the site, there are 2 separate pipelines and they're not encased in concrete. And that was the point where we had a concern about pulling these piling. If it was concrete encased, you would have a strong enough structure that it could withstand some of that settlement. But if they're just simply pipelines, using all of the soil to support themselves, that's when we changed our recommendation on pulling those. But even on phase 1 and phase 2, when we were next to some kind of utility that close, I believe we had cut most of those off and left some of those in place. But most of the piles did come out. But when we're there this close to the sanitary sewer, or in this case, the electric line, it just, I wouldn't recommend it. I think you're going to have long-term problems.
All right, any further discussion on the motion? All right, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Nay,
Nay.
So let me just circle back on that. I'm jotting it down as 4-2 with Knorr and Lyons opposed. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay. And I want to just verbally check in. Is Dan Cody with us yet? No. Okay. Okay. So we've got that at 4-2.
All right, next issue on our agenda is testing service agreements.
Exactly. So we do this every year. Sean Ulsrud, one of our engineering technicians, sends out requests for pricing from area soils exploration firms. I think he sent out 4 this year, but one of them didn't respond. The other 3 did. We've worked with all of them. We try, in fact, even to divvy up the work a little bit so that, everybody has some longer term relationship with the city. Their pricing is relatively consistent across the board. So we're recommending approval of engaging these 3 firms with an agreement that was included in the packets too, just as a template.
All 3 of them are part of the current agreement?
Yeah, so it would be CGC, Gestra, and Soils and Engineering Services. They would each have an independent contract with us.
Right.
Yep.
But I mean, those 3 are part of the soil testing agreement or the testing agreement.
Right. So we could call any one of
Yeah.
those three firms and say, hey, we've got a project that needs some compaction testing or asphalt density testing, and they'll show up and take care of that for us, or a developer.
I think Bob's question is, were they in the 2020 agreement?
Oh, yes, exactly. Sorry. Thanks for pulling me back around to the actual
I'm
question.
hoping that's
I
what Bob
missed
wants
it.
to know.
Well, I kind of got there anyway, but through Sean's answer, but that was my question. But when you said you'd had relationships with all three of them in the past, I assume that part of that might be under the current set of agreements.
Yeah, there were a number of years where we mostly called upon CGC for work, and they're all great to work with. It just turned out that more people were used to working with CGC, but we proactively pulled back on that and tried divvying things up a little bit so that we don't lose interest in the other two.
All right, anyone on the committee have any questions about these?
No, I'll go ahead and make a motion to recommend to the Finance Committee and Council approval of annual testing service agreements with CGC, Gestra, and SES.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second, Don.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this issue? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that's what we will recommend to the Finance Committee and the Council.
Very good.
Next issue is Pleasant View Road, Ellingson median break.
Right. So our consulting engineer, Brian Andreas with Strand Associates, worked up a memo. We've been in discussion, and I know Ted Ellingson is on the call here tonight, so he could weigh in too, about the idea of introducing a median break on Pleasant View Road south of 14. Let me get to the good part here for you, where there's a drawing of it. Brian presented several options, and right now there's just no median break proposed to get into that driveway. So right in and right out access is what it's got, and you can effectively get left out by turning right, going around the roundabout, and then heading north. If my cursor didn't move too fast on the screen, it's left in from northbound Pleasant View, where there's no good opportunity to get into this driveway. So you'd have to go past the driveway, across 14, turn around in the business, the industrial park, then come back southbound to get home. I don't know routinely how many times per day that happens, but it's a significant inconvenience. I won't use the word hardship because that's got some legal ramifications not applicable to the design of this. My understanding from Brian in some emails subsequent to his memo is that WISDOT guidance would, as general guidance, would not advocate for a median break this close to Highway 14. There's what's called an effective functional area, which is why he's color coded this thing for us. That says, don't put a median break there. Now, in part, that's general guidance, and in part, that's for multiple movements. So the city has some discretion here, and we could allow a single movement, either left out or left in. And again, left out, I think, is much less important, because by turning right and going around the roundabout, you're effectively turning left out. So we had Brian look at what would left in look like if we were to put something like that in. And while that's general guidance from WISDOT, it doesn't jeopardize federal funding, because this isn't DOT right of way. This is still city right of way at the end of the day. So it's our call to make. The preliminary designs to date haven't got anything but we have been kicking that around in the background. So let me go to a different option that shows what is being recommended. I just want to make sure this is, yeah, Exhibit C is what's called option 3 in the memo. But this is that same southerly of the two driveways. And this is that same left turn into what's now the Pro Build site or the old fish site. And this would be a left turn in for this property, limited to, number one, can we demonstrate that it can be used safely? If there's not a significant problem with crashes because of this. And number two, if this land were ever to redevelop for a use other than single family residential. So if it turned into a development that had more vehicular traffic, then we would want that closed off also. But if it's a few times a day by a relatively small number of people who understand this situation and are careful about it, as staff, we were willing to bring this to the committee to ask for your thoughts on that. Now, we're also in discussion with the city attorney about liability for that, and we don't have an answer on that yet.
Yeah, Sean, that was my initial kind of thought. It's like, 10 years in the future, is this going to be an issue if that property were to, develop into something more? So that would be my concern, is that I don't know if we want to open the door to having this issue, because then if there's a business there, they might want that left in, and I don't know. I feel like you're kind of could cause more problems down the road.
Maybe.
I don't know if we want to. Oh, go ahead.
My name is Ted Ellingson Jr. Is it acceptable for me to speak?
Yes, go ahead.
So our biggest concern as a family, obviously my dad is a senior citizen, and not that that makes him a bad driver or anything like that, but we also worry about, as he does grow older, having to navigate doing a U-turn. U-turns are dangerous, and it would be very nice, even if it went away after the fact of whatever use the property has in the future, if he had the ability to turn into his driveway for a safety standpoint for my father. That's really what our ultimate goal is. We're concerned about his long-term safety.
What would prohibit him, the way this is designed now, from making a left turn out of his driveway by going through that median break also, which looks like a fairly dangerous thing to do, going across 2 lanes of traffic and then sticking your nose out into 2 other ones?
Sure.
I can say personally, if that were me, I wouldn't do it because of the angle of it. It'd be very hard to maneuver your car that way. And with just, the southbound access to do a quick right out of his property and go through the roundabout, that's not a big deal. I mean, that's a free flowing movement. But when you start doing U-turns, like if you look at an aerial up in the industrial park where he would have to do a U-turn around there, there's cross traffic. I would be concerned about his safety. And, if you're that concerned about him taking a left-hand turn or coming straight out of his driveway, put a sign there that says no left-hand turns, and if he does it, give him a ticket. I would highly encourage that, because I wouldn't want him doing that.
Sean, any
Yeah.
thoughts about that?
That's effectively what we did up on Parmenter Street, just north of Century Avenue, where the Gobin car dealership used to be. And before that, it was a Sinclair station. So while it was a Sinclair station, we allowed a median cut through the nose just into the left turn bay of that for use by the gas fuel trucks to get into their south driveway. And we just never had a problem with it, but we did sign it that it's for left turns in and not for any turns out. And so it was that was a fairly similar situation, although with a different land use and a very different traffic profile on the road we were cutting across. It's Parmenter Street instead of Pleasant View Road, but we don't have a lot of these. That's the closest one I could think of where we allowed lefts in within the
There-
functional area
there's,
of a signal.
There's installations like this on University Avenue, right east of the old Brennan store, that seem to work pretty successfully. It would be very difficult to make to go out through that the wrong way.
Yeah, to come out and then angle your car this
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and then
And turn back the other
you'd
way.
effectively be doing a U-turn to turn left.
I've thought about doing it a couple times on University Avenue and gave up.
I like the way, Carl, you left it at, I thought about it. Yeah, and that's, the University Avenue ones look a little bit more like this, where they're,
Right. They
getting
have the-
people out
they
of
have
the
turn
traffic lane.
But it's for more cars. You're likely to have one car at a time doing this, and their stopping point is within the median itself. So
Yeah, and the other good news is that this is a reasonably wide median. So we wanted to make sure too that it's a reasonably safe area to pause while thinking about, is there someone coming off of 14 that I need to be concerned with? Is there a reasonable gap in traffic? So there's no certainties in life, but as staff, that was our recommendation, was to allow this, assuming that the city attorney doesn't know of a liability problem that really should preclude it. But other than that, to allow it until either there's a demonstrated crash history that suggests we should close it off, or the land use changes from single family.
Sean, what about with it's so close to the intersection? Like, I'm just wondering if you could back up a little bit. So if that person is trying to take a left turn into the driveway, there's people, coming, I don't know, is there any concern about that it's close to the intersection? I'm just going back to the guidance says not to necessarily do this.
Oh, right. Let me scroll up a little bit here. Okay. It wasn't letting me pan very well. Yeah, so it says effectively, don't do it within this red zone. And we're near the tail end of that. And so again, these guidances aren't written in absolute terms. They're good general guidance, and we follow them where we can. And sometimes we consider other things too, like is what we're about to do different from general guidance, better or worse on balance? Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, and then what about the future property, use, if that does eventually change into something other than a single family residence? How would that meeting get closed? I'm just thinking, like, if a business moves in there, they're maybe going to want, additional traffic flow or whatever. How does that?
Yeah. So
I'm just wondering, how will it ever really get closed?
The city still retains access control. So as this is redeveloping into something else, we'll need this already written down that says this access is for single family use only. The DOT does this. In fact, on Airport Road, they had several of those, and we had a couple ourselves where we allowed people to cross over the median only while it was a single family home. But as soon as it became something else, we closed those access points because you just get so many more cars through here. There's just a lot more opportunity for crashes. And especially as it becomes the kind of development where you have visitors unfamiliar with needing to pause and pay attention, that has its own sort of inherent risk with it.
I'd worry about the queue also if you had multiple cars trying to turn left there.
Yeah, this left turn lane could start
to
introduce pauses, which is one of the things we were a little concerned with is, as the homeowner, Ted, or somebody else is coming along this inside lane and puts their blinker on and starts to slow down. The car following might think that the reason they're doing that is they're about to decelerate and slip into this left turn lane, but they're actually going to slip into this left turn brake, 100 feet earlier. And that might cause some confusion. But frankly, if someone's brake lights go on and their blinker goes on, the following car should be paying enough attention to moderate their own speed. You know, so it's a risk. I just don't think it's a huge risk.
Well, you have the provision in what you've suggested for monitoring it for a year. And if it does become a problem within that year, if it generates numerous accidents or something, then you've got the option of closing it off earlier.
Right, exactly. You know, once we're going outside of general guidance, there's a lot of stuff in the future we can't measure. So we're taking our, putting our heads together and coming up with what we think is reasonable, but it might not pan out either.
Okay, any further questions about this at all? Someone wish to offer a motion?
I could read to you what I'm recommending as staff, or maybe it's even written in Brian's memo a little bit, but it's, we're recommending that the committee permit, contingent upon resolution of any potential liability issues that may be raised by the city attorney, to construct a break in the Pleasant View Road median, described as option 3 in Strand's memo, to allow left turns into but not out of the southerly Ellingson driveway, and monitoring of the median break for a year following construction, and closure of the median break if crash or traffic operation issues arise. And if no problems arise that would warrant closure of this access, then the median break may remain as long as the property use associated with the driveway remains single-family residential.
I'll move that.
We adopt the staff recommendation.
All right, Carl.
Was that Don or Carl? I missed it.
Carl, I think.
Carl, okay.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second them.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this issue? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
I think that was Carrie.
Oh, I have 5-1
Yep.
with Carrie.
5-1.
Okay.
All right, the motion carries then, and that should resolve that issue. We still got to get the city attorney's opinion on the liability.
Exactly. Yep. I've reached out to him, but don't have advice yet.
Okay.
So.
All right. Next issue.
That's a mailbox claim. Yeah. And I see Charlotte is in with us, and I'm assuming without last name that you're the Charlotte we're talking with. Cormier. Go ahead and pronounce your name for us.
That's Cormier.
Cormier. Okay, thank you. So we've got the documentation submitted for a claim in the amount of $330, which is consistent with a claim we had last year in the same neighborhood for the same materials, for the same kind of damage. Our policy normally is limited to $80 for mailboxes. We don't typically include installation for anything, but as long as it's up to the $80, I guess, it doesn't matter much. The bigger issue is on that similar situation last year, what the committee had decided was to leave it at $80, the same as anywhere else in the city, and to encourage the homeowner to talk to the HOA, which demanded this group of materials, the post, the mailbox, the newspaper box, to see if the association would cover the difference.
Well, I guess our feeling is that we're not presuming that this was a city plow that hit the box. We know it was. So I guess my question to people is, you know, if you as a property owner had a private plowing service do this, would you not ask the private plowing service to, reimburse you for the cost of replacing your box? I mean, I'm not seeing what the difference is, I guess.
This is Robert Burke. I think the biggest concern of this whole thing for me is just that it sounds like you made you put your report in like a year ago and it kind of got lost in the shuffle. And for that, I would like to apologize on behalf of the city, because that is unfortunate, that it took a year for this to come to everyone's attention. With that being said, the way that we look at this is that yeah, we want to take responsibility for things that we did. However, there is a limit, a maximum limit that is clearly stated. And if somebody puts in, a diamond studded, mailbox made out of glass and diamonds, it's going to be very expensive, but the city's not responsible for the replacement cost of the very expensive item. It's responsible for the cost of a more standardized, normal mailbox system. So here, as Sean said, we've had this exact thing come before us within, I think, about the last 12 months. And again, the mailbox was more expensive to put in than what we're willing to reimburse. And we have stuck with the fact that we're limiting the reimbursement up to $80. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand, we're not saying that the city plow didn't do it. We're agreeing that it appears definitive that it did. But I think at this point, I think $80 is what the city would be on the hook for, and anything above and beyond that is maybe a discussion to be had with the homeowners association.
Well, I can guarantee they are not going to be interested either, because they are again going to say that it wasn't their fault either that the mailbox got hit.
Well, it's not their fault that the mailbox got hit, but it's their rules and regulations that require what turns out to be a considerably more expensive than a standard mailbox. And I mean, you can envision things, I'm sure, that you could end up with masonry structures and lots of other things that would be required by homeowners association or neighborhood groups or whatever, that, I don't know that it's fair to pass those costs along to everybody else in the city. If the homeowners association requires that, I would certainly think it's reasonable for the homeowners association to stand up and assume at least partial reimbursement for the cost of it when it has to be replaced. Again, there's not an issue that it was the city's fault. It certainly was, but there is a policy in effect, and it's one that we have stuck with for some time, and it's not one that I think under the circumstances is an unreasonable policy. And if there are areas of the city that require mailboxes above and beyond a standard mailbox, that's something that homeowners should know, or homeowners association should maybe step up and provide some assistance for also.
Okay. Well, I'll have to see what further action I can take, I guess.
Sure.
Because I think it's a big cost. So.
Yeah, and obviously the contracts or agreements that you have in the homeowners association, maybe they'll allow you to replace it with something lesser. Although after a year, my guess is it's already been replaced.
No, we've already replaced it.
Yeah. So, but unfortunately, I think you've kind of heard our position, and I'll make it a little bit more formal by making my motion to continue with the city's standard policy in this matter.
And reimburse up to that amount.
Reimburse up to and probably exactly $80, since she's obviously spent more
Yes.
than the $80 to replace, but we will at least supplement the cost of that by paying the $80 that is part of our policy.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion to that effect. Is there a second to the motion?
This is Carrie. I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this issue? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that's what we will provide, an $80 reimbursement. We thank you for coming and making your presentation, and I'm sorry we weren't able to do everything that you wanted, but this is exactly what we did in an identical case a short time ago in your neighborhood, and I think we need to have some consistency here. So,
All right. Thank you for your time.
thank you. All right, last issue on our agenda is 5-year street plan.
Right. And I know Sean Ellsrud's here. In fact, he just turned his video on. So welcome, Sean. Sean Ellsrud is the engineering technician that has been monitoring and really putting together a lot of our capital improvement program with regard to roads. We've, well, in fact, it says in the memo here, since 2017, Sean guided us toward implementing a sort of data-driven methodology to updating annually our 5-year street improvement program. So this year, as we were looking out at our projected 5-year plan, everybody on council knows things were starting to total up to more than $2 million in any given year, which is really our target upper limit. You know, so Sean went back and did quite a lot of work to try to get things back in line. He updated our cost estimator and took a look at some other priorities that have changed, such as County Highway Q has been postponed for a while, largely because we were anticipating redoing that pavement following the sanitary sewer force main associated with Bishop's Bay development, but that's on hold for quite a while. So we don't have any pressing need to get County Highway Q resurfaced. Part of it was the downtown Parmenter project. We know we're pushing off to at least 2022, but what we heard from the business community is they might almost prefer 2023. So we're going ahead and including that in the draft plan for this year that we're putting forward. Middleton Springs Drive notably has a significant icing problem due to high groundwater that we just can't take care of without doing some underground work. And it's in poor condition anyway, but we're proposing pushing that up several years to try to take care of installing storm sewer and some under drains to get that addressed sooner rather than later. And then Parmenter Street up to the north near the Tribeca area is a TIF funded project with some state funding that had a 6-year limit as of its award last year. So we've got 5 years to get that done, but we want to make sure that we're trying to get that done in a reasonable conjunction with Tribeca's development. And then Sean takes a look too at the mapping and tries to make sure that we're trying to keep neighborhood roads together so that we're not going in and tearing something up and then the next year going into virtually the same area and tearing something else up. That if we're going to get into a neighborhood, that we can try to get some meaningful coverage of roads done all at the same time. So it's a lot of stuff that gets balanced, and the upshot is we try always to include the map of what we've already got programmed, but then take a look too at what our new plan would end up looking like. And you know, we talked, gosh, when was that? I think in spring, maybe summer, about adding a note to this plan going forward, just to remind everybody it's a planning document. And this is not a promise. This is our best plan as of the year it's adopted, going forward in our 5-year CIP.
All right, questions, comments, committee?
If the Mayflower Drive alternate doesn't get accepted for this year, is that it not shown for next year either or any other time? Is that a?
Right. We just got bids last Friday. We don't have a firm answer, although it is looking like this block of Mayflower north of Maywood probably will exceed our capital budget allocation. And I'm envisioning that we'll make a recommendation at our next meeting then to defer that from the award, and not accept the alternate, if you will, in which case we'll want to modify this map then to make it green, I should think.
Yeah. A couple of years.
Yeah, and well, these are all color coded, so that would push it to 2024.
Is that,
We don't need to do the hearing next time?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that's what?
Well, we were going to have a hearing next time on the sidewalk costs. Is that?
Right, yep. Well, it's not just the sidewalk cost. I know that's the most controversial part of our assessment program, but we need a public hearing for the overall assessments associated with the project.
Okay.
If we push it to 2024, will the notification for the public hearing be modified such that they know it does not include that small section?
No,
Okay.
that got sent to the newspaper already, so it'll be published on Thursday.
All
But it's always really generic about, that we're going to talk about assessments,
right.
but not any particular piece of interest.
Okay.
when would if the street project, I assume the sidewalk would get done at the same time the street project gets done.
Yes, right. Yep.
So if that's in 2024, what's the point of having assessment discussions now about that? I mean,
Well, we'll be talking about two things really. One is the assessments for the full length of the Mayflower
Right.
project all the way to South Avenue and all of Hubbard and Violet and Orchid, all of that. And oh, by the way, it also includes, this road narrowing and sidewalk in this little block here. Now, if the recommendation is not to award that piece of the bid, it falls out of the assessment schedule too, and probably doesn't need at length discussion about what are the assessments, because then they just wouldn't be
but that
applicable.
recommendation would come after the public hearing, correct?
Exactly. So we'll start with the public hearing, and
And
I
we
don't
can announce at the
mind
outset of that.
Yeah, sorry, Bob, I cut you off. I was just going to say, I don't mind introducing the public hearing to mention that staff is, again, I don't have a firm recommendation yet, but let's just say that that's the staff recommendation. I don't mind opening the public hearing by pointing out to folks that's further down the agenda, staff will be recommending awarding a bid without that alternate.
Right. And that alternate then would get pushed back to 2024 under the 5-year street plan, assuming it gets adopted.
I think that would make the most sense for this neighborhood then, to keep it all shaded green. And it might have some fallout elsewhere in the 5-year plan then to keep our $2 million limit, but that's the game we play. I just think it makes a lot of sense then to do that.
Okay.
Sean, when is the public hearing?
It's
22nd.
the 22nd. Yeah, in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And
So what do you need from us? A recommendation of approval of the current 5-year plan as it looks?
Unless there are recommended changes, in which case we'll go back and take a look at what else we could try to shuffle in coming up with a different balance. But otherwise, yeah, our recommendation to refer it to the Plan Commission and recommend it to the Finance Committee and Common Council for approval. Usually the Plan Commission takes a look at it before it gets to the Finance Committee and Common Council.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and move that. And then if there's a second, then we can have other discussions beyond that for modifications to the motion, if we need to.
This is Robert. I would second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Anybody have any modifications to the plan that they wish to offer? Hearing none, are we ready to vote on this? It would appear so. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that's will be our recommendation to the, we forward this to the Plan Commission, and then our recommendation would be for council and
And
Finance
the
Committee and
finance.
council.
Yep, exactly.
Okay,
And then we use that. The reason this is a planning document is because we use it then for coordination with other agencies like the MPO and the county. And then we file this too with the state. So.
Hey, Sean, I have a question. I know I've asked this before, but I'm kind of forgetting the reason. Is part of the reason why the city doesn't 100% sidewalk improvements, you know, in neighborhoods where there isn't sidewalks, is that just because of budgetary constraints? I'm just wondering if that should something that we should consider in the future, so that there's not such an opposition to putting sidewalks in. It's
a great policy question. Different cities do it different ways. And I expect we'll talk about that at our next meeting. In terms of the assessments, the assessment policy certainly will come up. I don't want to spend much time talking about it now because it's not on the agenda, but that is something this committee has talked about a couple times in the past. I think the most recent action that the Public Works Committee took was to defer further consideration of a policy change until after the Plan Commission puts together a sidewalk map that shows where we should or shouldn't extend or sidewalks into what are currently gaps, connectivity, if you will.
John,
And that hasn't happened. So.
When a developer builds a new neighborhood, the developer pays the cost of putting in the roads and sidewalks and water and sanitary sewer, et cetera. Is that correct? So the cost of the sidewalks gets rolled into the cost of the property.
All that public infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sean, would we have to follow up with the Plan Commission on where that stands or what the timeline is, or how would we kind of move forward with that?
I do want to follow up with staff. I know they've been really focused on getting the comprehensive plan put together and just haven't had time for much else, but that's nearly at the finish line now. So I think it's fair game to circle back on this issue from a planning perspective. Yeah. Especially since we'll be talking about it in a couple weeks again.
Yeah.
Well, Sean Allsrud, I just have to say, you did a great job, and we look forward to you doing it again, it sounds like, in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Well, that's okay. That'll be a small change, you know.
Yeah,
hopefully.
So with that, if we do that, that's going to change. We'll have to modify what you're seeing now in the 5-year plan.
Right.
And we know it's possible that it's coming. We know that is based on financial considerations, and that right now it looks like there won't be money we're doing that one section, so that would mean that section gets delayed. So at least we know in advance kind of where it might be going. But we'll kind of wait from our perspective, I think, until things are more definitive.
Yeah, because we will have the ripple effect of moving that section to 2024, then means we have to take something out of 24 and put it somewhere else, and it basically shifts the 5-year plan completely, so.
So, which is a fair question. Would you rather have it come back here, or do you want Sean to just make modifications as best he feels and get that to the plan commission?
I would be fine with it not coming back here personally, because I feel like we know what it is now, but we know that things outside of our control may change that a little bit. And I trust Sean to do what he needs to do. So I don't feel like it serves a lot of benefit to come back here, but what do other members think?
I think that's fine as well.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, well, we'll do that. I think too, Sean's done a great job. He has a good feel for how this goes together. And we'll make modifications then before getting it to the plan commission.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
It's the last of our agenda.
Any other business for the committee, or are we ready to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
This is
I'll
Robert.
second.
Okay.
I'm
Sorry. beat you
I'm
to
gonna
it.
take Burke, I think. Yeah, his hand was on the buzzer.
All right. All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we stand adjourned.
Thanks to everyone.
Yeah, we'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.